Today's episode of the Cloudcast is sponsored by Datadog, a real-time monitoring platform that unifies metrics, traces, and logs into one tightly integrated platform. Datadog APM empowers developer teams to identify anomalies, resolve issues, and improve application performance. Begin collecting stack traces, visualizing them as flame graphs, organizing them into profile types such as CPU, I/O, and more. Teams can search for specific profiles, correlate them with distributed traces, and identify slow or underperforming code for analysis and optimization. Plus, with Datadog APM Live Search, you can perform searches across the full stream of ingested traces generated by your application over the last 15 minutes. Try Datadog APM free with a 14-day trial, and Datadog will send you a free t-shirt. Visit datadog.com/APM-Cloudcast to get started. That's datadog.com/APM-Cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you're at. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Here in the United States, we are wrapping up our Thanksgiving holiday and getting back to work, tackling all of those projects that we quite frankly, put off until after the holiday. So no news this week, but I do have a few bits of housekeeping and some announcements. First, we have some great upcoming shows. Now that the dust has settled around OpenAI, we're going to do a retrospective and a bit of analysis and breakdown on that. We also plan to do AWS reInvent summary show, as well as our usual end-of-year shows. Next, we are starting to plan our look-ahead shows that we do every January. We're compiling a list of topics and guests, and we'll have more on that soon. But as always, if you have feedback on topics or guests you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. With that, I'll wrap up for this week and we'll move on to our interview. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about culture, teams, and the adoption of FinOps.
Are you getting pressure from finance to justify or reduce your cloud bill? CloudZero is the only cloud cost platform loved by engineers and trusted by finance. CloudZero can identify unused, idle, or over-provisioned resources, alert you to spend anomalies, and organize 100% of your spend into a framework that mirrors your business structure, like cost per customer, product feature, or team. It's the most powerful platform ever built to provide accurate, granular visibility into your total cloud spend without the typical pitfalls of legacy cloud cost management tools like endless tagging or clunky Kubernetes support. Manage cost, optimize development, and maximize profit, all in one platform. Join companies like Rapid7, Drift, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. Visit today to experience immediate and ongoing savings on your cloud bill. And we're back. And folks, as we get into the latter parts of the year here, oftentimes our thoughts are sort of between two things. One, we're trying to finish the year for work, finish the year for quotas, if you will, or fourth quarter, and so on and so forth. So our mind is oftentimes on trying to do the best for the business, either spend for projects or save money for projects, stay in our budget. But we're also oftentimes thinking about the holidays and all the things that go on with that. And sometimes we can get distracted. And so it's really important for us to kind of remember to be thinking about, especially for fourth quarter, because fourth quarter is the one in which the accountants are the most specific about sharpening their pencils, about making sure that we meet numbers so that for the whole wrap for the whole year, everybody's happy, everybody meets their goals for the year, and they can plan for the next year accordingly. And so today we're going to dive into a little bit about how we go about doing that. And one of the topics that comes back up over and over again from both you, but also advances in the industry is around FinOps. And so very, very excited today to not only bring back our friends from DoIT, our friend Ieva, Technical Account Manager at DoIT, but also joining her today, Gary Harmson, Principal Engineer at Google. Ieva and Gary, welcome to the show. Ieva, great to have you back. And Gary, welcome for the first time.
Great to be here, Brian.
Thanks very much.
Gary, since you are a newcomer, I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit of background before we dive into what your focus is at Google, and then I really want to talk about how both companies have been working with with a number of customers to get those bills under control, but more importantly, just to put frameworks in place for better, more efficient spending. So, Gary, give us a little bit of background on both yourself and your skill set, but also what you focus on at Google.
Thank you, Brian. I started as a developer back in the early 2000s, which actually feels so long ago now. And since that point, I've spent the last 20 years working in tech, with the last 10 years specializing in cloud specifically. So in my current role, I work in the customer engineering division of Google Cloud. And day to day, I spend most of my time in the company helping educate developers on how to leverage our platform, its ever-expanding suite of services, really to build incredible applications. And what I found in this role is it turns out demonstrating value and optimizing cloud usage can be a challenge for developers. And that's where I spend some of my time helping educate them on how to consume FinOps on our platform.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Ieva, I want to sort of start. We had a chance, I don't know, a month and a half ago, to talk with your friends over at Slide. They were very focused around trying to make FinOps work for a startup. But I want to kind of broaden out a little bit and talk about, you get a chance to work with a lot of different companies. One of the challenges that we often hear is language, just the most basic concept of language between the finance teams and the engineering and operations team is just different. Can you kind of give us a sense of, where are the big gaps from just a language, being able to talk to each other, have common terminology? Where are we in terms of the challenges with, two groups that just look at the world differently and speak differently, and some of the things that are helping bridge that gap?
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be back. So in terms of your question, so the language is certainly complex. And when you think about finance teams and engineering teams working together, it feels like they are speaking a different language. That's where FinOps really comes in, and it's not static as well, right? So it's ever changing. So one of my probably best recommendations that I have, and what I see really being effective in terms of bridging that gap is getting your finance folks to get a foundational cloud certification. So that really broadens their horizon and really gives those words that they can use when talking to engineering, talking about the cloud spend. And additionally, when things do go wrong and bills are unexpectedly higher, it's much, much easier to drive accountability when you have an idea, what compute engine or committed use discounts are. And if you can justify a cloud center of excellence and one or two FinOps practitioners, that really helps to solve the problem. But I'm yet to see that in place with any of my customers today.
Yeah, we hear that a lot in terms of, we do see cloud centers of excellence, but oftentimes finance isn't necessarily a part of that. It's oftentimes, kind of the technology teams figuring out, kind of pushing that. I'm curious, for either one of you, Gary or Ieva, do you find there are good first steps to this, kind of language barrier? Is it good to just sort of find some time to get some of the team together and just walk through some basics or do some Q&A? Is it just easiest to start with the most simple things?
Maybe I can take that one.
Sure.
Yeah. I think the reality of this is creating a mutual understanding between teams. And the curriculum is really there to eliminate the complexity of jargon that can sometimes occur when these two teams are talking together. You've got finance teams, and they're typically talking about cost of goods sold, rates, usage, net present values. And engineers are more concerned about systems design, principles, capacity, resilience, performance. And engineers will still often consider cost, but at a lower priority. And so what I've found and observed in the past is that finance have self-taught some comprehension at a high level of some of the spend drivers, servers, storage, networks, those type of fundamental spend consumption elements. But the challenge with cloud is that finance teams now need to keep up with this relentless pace of innovation on the platform and this granular usage that then comes around it within the consumption. And so really, we're going back to basics with those finance teams and helping them understand what is cloud in its first concept, the basic principles of cloud, elasticity, measured service, resource pooling, that kind of core understanding vocabulary, and then applying that understanding with a more layered approach on new services that these cloud providers like Google Cloud can give as a end service. So you've got obviously the managed container platforms, the database platforms, and object storage and so forth. And the training should be there to help everybody in the company understand the benefits that these services can give and how to think about the different elements of feature functionality you can enable or disable along that consumption journey. And so really that formal curriculum is a way to establish common principle between those two teams, and expanding the finance functions of basic knowledge of standard compute technologies into that cloud vocabulary. And so I think that the best place to start is to go through this cloud fundamentals training, like Ieva said. Another way that I've seen it work quite well is to allow and establish a communities of interest, which is a forum for people to ask questions and get advice between those disparate teams. Having said that, you need to promote psychological safety when you create these new Q&A environments. We want to make sure that everybody is okay to ask a question without fear of demonstrating any knowledge gaps. That can be quite challenging early on, so you really need a really good advocate and champion to ask those questions continuously and get feedback from that team. Another good way that I've seen customers address this knowledge gap is to have some short-term shadowing opportunities. So maybe having the finance team observe the daily activities of the cloud team and ask questions in the moment. How does that service work? Can you show me a little bit more about what people are doing with that product when they're consuming it? And then alongside those training and more hands-on elements, that's the way to really get the camaraderie and common way of working between the two teams.
Yeah, no,
I'll agree with that. Sorry, Brian, just to jump in. Just bringing your finance teams together into meetings with engineering is already like a first great step that some of my customers have done, and it has yielded some unexpected results. Both finance teams and engineering are really curious, right? And they want to kind of know and see how engineering actions affect the cloud bill, and for finance team to also understand, what those line items are, and how they can both have those effective conversations, around cost optimization and FinOps and etc.
Yeah, no, I think you guys highlight a number of really important things. I think first and foremost is just a willingness to sit down and educate the other one. Just don't assume they're going to figure it out on their own, because these worlds are very different. Like Gary said, like finance thinks in terms of kind of accounting principles and costs and so forth, and technologists think in terms of systems, and so it's not sort of like 5 degrees separation. They're very different. And then I think you highlight a really important thing, which is kind of that walk a mile in my shoes, right? Live a day in what I do, and help them understand. I'm not going to explain to you, how a database works and sharding works or whatever, but at least I can explain to you, these are the system inputs that drive the cost of the system, or these are the things that we think about in terms of constraints or solving a business problem. And you can, it's probably going to be an ongoing process, because depending on, the different teams' backgrounds. But yeah, I think starting with those simple things, having an open dialogue, having a set of communities of interest where things are documented, I think is really, really important to at first have those principles in place. And I can imagine without those, you're going to have a lot of, jumping around and guessing and assumptions and stuff that just leads to animosity between the. I want to dive a little bit into this other challenge that we run into sometimes, or we hear quite a bit of with FinOps, and not so much FinOps, but cloud billing, in that, because of the way the clouds are built, your system, your application, holistically could be made up of a dozen or so services, or it could be made up of multiple things. So you potentially get bills that have line items that are hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands at the end of the month, and it can be hard for people to necessarily grasp. Well, what do these 6 line items mean? Do they relate to this thing, or what should I look at it from optimizing? I'm curious. I don't know, Gary, maybe jump in first, but like how do you find that especially in this FinOps paradigm, like how do you help explain to the finance team like what all is going on when the bill shows up and it seems like, well, I thought we were talking about one application, but there's 10,000 line items here. Like how do people organize a thinking around that?
It's a really interesting point, Brian, and great to discuss actually. The beauty of cloud is the fact that it's a consumption business model. So everything is a transaction. So taking that point in hand, actually, you would think that finance people would be very receptive to the granularity that they're now seeing. At Google Cloud, we have an enormous service portfolio comprising of hundreds of different services with thousands of SKUs. And then within those SKUs, we provide granular metering down to potentially per second billing. So you've got this abundance of SKUs tailored for your service, specific to your needs. And that is the beauty of cloud. You get this flexibility. But as you mentioned, then you end up with data sprawl through that consumption data. And that's really about how do you address that data challenge? How do you consolidate that data, apply meaning to it, and be able to visualize it so people can then understand and make decisions upon it? And the reality of that is it's all a common data problem to solve. And when customers try and understand billing on our platform, we typically recommend that they go through the data, information, knowledge, wisdom hierarchy. It's a valuable concept to work from. And I don't know, Brian and Ieva, have you seen that model before?
No, first time for me.
Yeah, same.
Okay, maybe I'll try and describe it and visualize it for you and the listeners on the call. So this DIKW hierarchy, as it's often shortened to, is a pyramid type methodology. And at the base is data. That's the raw data, these thousands of SKUs, tens of thousands of line items. But you want to be able to apply information, then knowledge, then wisdom to that raw data. So how do we actually do that? So we start first by applying information to the data. The way that we do that is we apply cost allocation methods. In cloud, that's typically done with something called tagging or labeling and resource hierarchy. Using those two methods, you can group that billing data into smaller chunks of consumption and then be able to describe who in the company is using that spend and ask questions from that user base. That's a great starting point, and something even today that a lot of customers struggle to get to, because you have to be really good at the hygiene of tagging and labeling and be really prescriptive about the resource hierarchy. The next step on that is once you have that information, you need to apply knowledge to it. So what do I mean by knowledge? Knowledge is really about being able to understand the usage of that information over time and then applying some pragmatic action to it. So you'll be able to see that information trend by your spend on a particular project or a particular team. And then you can forecast that over time. And you'll be able to say, okay, that's abnormal growth in that particular team or application. Or maybe for a particular team, you're actually trying to have a bit more of an inquisitive understanding about what they're doing, using that trend analysis over time that you've seen. So that's a great way then for you to be able to take action on what you're seeing through that trend analysis. After you've got to that level of understanding, now you're really at the peak of this pyramid that I'm trying to articulate, wisdom. The wisdom really is about using that knowledge that you now have on trends and abnormalities to make sound judgments on your cloud spend moving forwards. And it's the highest level of understanding. It's combining knowledge with experience and intuition. And so to make that real, how does it relate to the platform? It's the causal relationships of the trends that you're seeing on the platform and then being able to justify the rationale behind them. So, for example, if you're seeing in December your cloud spend rocketing, Is that because you're running a Black Friday campaign? You're running sales and the daily active use on the platform is growing. So you're expecting that spend to happen. Or is it a symptom of a flawed cloud management practice? Maybe people have left something on. And that's where you're really having this outside-in view to drive that discussion and to make you informed as a finance leader when speaking to the IT team. So really, I see it being critical that you kind of build up this view of the data from raw data to cost allocated data to trend analysis, and then finally to cause and effect.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I do think it's, and we'll put a link to the show notes. You and I talked about this a little bit ahead of time. We'll put a link to the show notes for some stuff around the framework for people that are interested in digging into it. But yeah, I think it's helpful to not think of the bill as just 10,000 lines of like who knows what, but to have very much a hierarchical way to think about it, a way of tagging it, a way of associating it with the business as opposed to just line items of technology. So that's super helpful. Ieva, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about experience, because we're all familiar with the pre-activity of budgeting. So we're sort of looking at our crystal ball. We have a project. We want to try and budget it. We do the best we can to make a guess of what it will cost. We know the process of sort of after the project of, figuring out were we over the number, were we under the number, maybe why did that happen? Have you found in your experience, especially having worked with cloud projects, which, technology projects can go right and wrong for all sorts of different reasons. Are there any tips or tricks or things that you've learned kind of mid-project, whether it's from a monitoring and visibility perspective or, kind of an education between teams perspective, so that there are less surprises at the end, or, maybe more opportunities that get unlocked depending on how the project's going, mid-project?
Absolutely. Well, first of the bits of advice that I have is that you should not be looking at your bill once per month. It's already way too late to do anything about it other than pay it. You should be setting projects. You should be setting budgets for projects or teams, get show back in place, or even better, charge back, and try to inform your engineering teams weekly and get cost anomaly in place. So getting the reporting in place is obviously great, and having those reports sent weekly is excellent, but you are still relying on someone looking at them and also taking action. So that's where alerts really come in. So part of our offering here at Do It, we have a Do It console where where our customers can set alerts on specific service and also at the SKU level, which has been really great, and it has saved quite a lot of dollars at the end of the month for the customers, where, let's say, someone's spinning up a few instances in the dev project on the Friday evening and just forgetting about them and, going home for the weekend. So those alerts have been really useful to kind of, act quickly, go into the project and just disable whatever's been spun up and just left. Other than that, budgeting is also really good. And also what you should be reviewing those budgets monthly, right? You are, as Gary mentioned as well, you are expected as a business to change, your demands change in usage. And if you do have a Black Friday event coming, you're potentially, expecting that your sales will skyrocket. So you should budget for that appropriately as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it seems very much like the principles that we've been learning about observability, from an application perspective, right? Keep up with what's going on a regular basis, examine it, using active data and so forth, is starting to kind of roll over into the FinOps world, right? Don't necessarily live by the quarter end or the month end, but live by sort of more of an observability kind of viewpoint, right? Make it active, use live data, make adjustments as you go.
Yes, agreed. And just don't rely on the human element for someone to catch that anomaly, get it automated. Then you can sleep well at night.
Yeah. Gary, I want to pick your brain a little bit experience wise. As people are putting FinOps principles in place, they're starting to understand the bill. They're thinking about it more holistically and with the right framework. Who are you typically finding is more active in the process? Do you find that the engineering teams are adapting more now that they've got visibility through different tooling to them? Are you finding that the finance teams are more active because this is the first time maybe that they've had more real-time visibility into what's going on? What have you typically found the interaction to be in terms of who's stepping up to ask questions, to push certain policies and procedures and stuff? Is it 50-50? Does it tend to be one team versus the other early on? What have you found in your experience?
It's a good question, Brian. And actually, to be honest, it's a kind of it depends type question.
Sure.
The reality today, in my observation, is that FinOps adoption and its maturity varies quite widely across customers. And the extent to which companies prioritize FinOps is largely dependent on their desire to demonstrate value on their investment. And so what do I mean by that? If the organization early on anticipates significant cloud adoption, then I often observe that FinOps reporting structures are really important from day one, and they put a lot of thought into cost allocation, visualization, and ongoing initiatives to help them ensure that they're getting value from cloud. However, that's really driven from the boardroom. And, if there is going to be a significant cloud adoption, that's usually something that has a strategy and business case that has gone through approval at that level. And the leaders are keen to link cloud spend to their overall revenue growth or other objectives that they have through adopting cloud. Typically, I will also see other customers that maybe have not had the foresight to do this, and they trigger more of a retrospective focus on finance and engineering discussions. So this might be a prompt from an immediate financial remediation for spend overruns. And then they typically put a strong emphasis on cost optimization. And that's often something that the IT engineering teams will then lead with. And in that scenario, there's usually a little bit of adversarial discussion between finance and IT to really figure out what a good position should be for spend on the platform, using good cost optimization initiatives like right sizing and offloading data to lower cost mediums, and using managed services that are on a more granular per use model. But I would say ideally, you want a cross-functional team reporting into the company's leadership to be able to drive that reporting, inspection, and remediation. The reason why people generally gravitate towards that central model and why we promote it so heavily is because it gives clear accountability on their FinOps responsibilities. And you can streamline the decision-making in the organization as a result of that. It also enables a central place to go and collaborate and learn from others. And that knowledge sharing, as we discussed earlier in the call, is really, really important. You need people having common understanding of the huge swathes of new services that are being launched. And the COE for FinOps is a vehicle to do that. So I would say that the discussion on FinOps, it really depends on where that customer is on their journey and their comprehension of the need of FinOps, which arguably is one of the most important priorities when you're onboarding into the cloud, whether they've thought about that upfront or whether they're doing that retrospective focus that we talk about with cost optimization.
Yeah. I want to ask you both sort of one last question. I know I appreciate the experience you've been sharing. Any good kind of customer anecdotes, customer stories that you can share about as they've implemented FinOps or as they've started putting these things in place? Like what results do you tend to see? Obviously, you would expect. We spent somewhat less money. We avoided some waste or overuse. But like, if anybody's listening to this and they go, well, maybe we'll just put some static rules in place and hopefully that does it. But like, what are some of the kind of examples that you've seen from different companies in terms of we put this in place and now this is what our world looks like?
So I can share one good example of how just by sharing reporting and insight into the cloud costs to the end engineers is driving the costs down. And it's really that simple. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to tell people to go and right size and optimize. Just simply by showing the reporting and kind of showing how engineers' actions are impacting the end cloud bill, it will automatically start bringing it down. Some more mature things that my customers are doing. So they are also gamifying the resource optimization, which also has yielded some interesting results. And one I'm yet to see, but I'd love to see it somewhere out in the wild, is actually incentivizing that resource optimization and just FinOps adoption as in general. That would be very, very interesting. And I'm sure for the business, if you incentivize your engineers and say, if you save me an X amount at the end of the month, I will give you 10% of that as a bonus, because that would be very interesting to see.
Nice, interesting. Yeah, make it put it right in their pocketbook. Make it personally motivating. I like that.
Absolutely.
Any good stories, Gary, that people might be able to emulate, or just kind of results they can strive for?
Sure. One of the best things that I heard recently was somebody that actually put a challenge towards their CFO. And that was that if cloud is such a benefit because of this variable cost model, and we can clearly associate spend to our business with cost of goods sold as a result of that, why are we not spending more on the cloud over time? Because we should be getting and correlating benefits to that allocation of resource and investment. And so they made it really clear that cloud is much more about tying usage outside of just platform consumption and the benefits of that usage over time in a business context, and challenging those senior leaders, in this case, the CFO, to take an ambition on that remit and to further invest on the cloud. So I thought that was a really nice way to reposition the use of cloud, making it very explicit that cloud is there to help the business grow. Fundamentally, your costs in cloud should be sublinear to your business growth over time. So you can use something like financial contribution, which is something a lot of finance leadership are particularly interested in, to see the correlating effect of that consumption versus your business growth. The other side, I think, that I learned that was quite interesting with many customers is empower engineers to have individual accountability and treat the cost as if it were their own, a bit like Eva's just mentioned. If you give them ownership, then they're more likely to experiment and come up with really unique ideas. So really, FinOps is not a guardrail to stop people from consuming the platform. It's a way for them to see a way to justify their development, to grow innovative new ideas and new development activity.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's it was my very first job in tech. That was one of the very first things that the CEO sort of made clear. He said, "Look, you may not feel like you can impact the biggest top line of the business, but ultimately, this is your company, this is your business as much as anything else. So treat the money you spend as if it's your spend. You don't have to necessarily think of it as like don't spend anything, but just think about it in terms of do you think this is a good idea? And usually, just using that common sense oftentimes will get people to make have good rationale for the decisions they make. So I like that. I like hearing that coming back up again. Well, listen, Ieva and Gary, it was great to have both of you on today. It was great to have both of you sharing your experience, both just in terms of how people are thinking about this, how the cultural challenges are starting to be worked through, and I really appreciate it. Any last minute thoughts or any last minute advice for folks that want to work with either Do It or Google or the two of you in terms of the best way to engage with the teams and hopefully make FinOps a more regular part of what they do every day?
Eva, do you want to go first?
I am trying to think of a great answer here. I'll probably go with just get a strong inform phase going, get the cost visibility going, and that will bring new challenges by itself.
I like it.
It's a great question.
You got the last word, Gary.
It's a great question, Brian. So I think invest in educating your team. The core concept of this is having people informed to make decisions. And so you can only be informed by investing the time to educate yourself on all of the new growth and launch of services on cloud platforms. Here at Google, we spend a lot of time helping customers understand the new features and functionality. We'll be delighted to have discussions on that further with any of our listeners today.
Good stuff. Well, thank you both again for the time today. Again, we get a chance to talk about a lot of technology, but it's always good to bring it back to practicality and how it actually gets put in practice. So thank you both for the time today. Folks, we're going to wrap it up. There was a number of things we talked about in the show today that we will put links for you in the show notes. So don't sweat about if you didn't get everything. With that, though, I want to thank both Ieva and Gary for their time today. I want to thank the folks at both Do It and Google for their time today. Thank you all for that. Hope you are doing well. Thank you for listening. Thanks for telling a friend about the show and helping us grow. We've only got about a month here left in 2023. So hopefully you are doing well. You're meeting your financial goals. You are keeping your budgets under the numbers they're supposed to be, and you're doing very well. So with that, I'll wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.